Hello everyone and welcome to my A to C Stitch with Me's. Currently we are stitching a Snowy Reindeer by Frosty Forest. Not by Frosty Forest, by Country Cottage Needlework. It's the Frosty Forest series. And it's going to look like this. I still haven't decided if I'm going to use the buttons, but I have the buttons if I want to use them. And this is how far we have gotten on this section. It's part 8 of the series, but it's the third part I am doing because the pattern goes in a spiral shape. So I have done number 1 and 2, now I'm doing number 3, and then I have like the full width of the project. Since I'm doing all 9 of the Frosty Forest series on one piece of fabric. I'm so out of practice with this. So sorry if I'm a little bit out of it, but hopefully I will get into it soon enough. So currently it's Friday the 26th of June for me, and for you it will be a total different date. That's because all of these videos are pre-recorded. So you're seeing me from the past, basically. And I am in your future. Just make it a little bit more complicated. So, all right. Gonna stitch with this 469 to finish off the cones. I didn't finish the last time. And then we are going to do a lot of snowflakes. And I have a few new ways of starting and ending floss. So I thought I would show you that. Some of them you have seen before. Some of them I'm not going to do, like the first one you usually learn, where you secure the floss at the back, both for starting and stopping. I'm not going to do that because I don't flip my project over. But the other ones I know how to do. Those I can show you. So, let's zoom in and get started. So the first one is you take a length of floss that is the double length of what you usually would be stitching with. You take the two ends and you put them together. And that makes it so you have one end that has these two ends, and you have the other one having a loop. And that's so what you do is that you put the needle on the end that has two ends. The way I do it is I squeeze the floss in between when it's on your floss, and I just take the eye of the needle right over the floss and push through. And when it's new and not fuzzy at all, that's pretty easy to do. If it's fuzzy, I have another technique that I most likely will also show you later on. So now I have the needle with the floss, and at the other end of where my needle is the loop. So from the front, you can also do this from the back, but I'm doing it from the front because I don't turn around my project. maybe I should call this video something about starting the methods you can start and stop floss from the front of your fabric, because I don't do it on the back. So I go down, I don't pull the floss through. I come up. Still, I don't pull the floss through, but I pull it pretty close. So I have the loop here. You don't need to pull it that close. You can put the needle through the loop much earlier if you want, but this is the way I do it. Then I will put my needle through the loop and then pull. And as you can see, now you have this floss going through the loop. And to get that loop, you don't want it in front of the fabric. To get that loop to the back, I go down the place I came up with my needle. Because then, as you can see, I'm pulling the loop to the back. Because in a way, with the floss, you make a loop over the loop to pull it back down. And then I can start stitching. I usually always do my crosses from bottom left to top right, and then from top right, then from bottom right to top left. It's hot here today. My head is not with me. I'm just saying, it's melting. But it's warm in a nice way. I'm glad it's warm and that we have a nice summer. It's really enjoyable with the sun being up. You can see, even though I'm trailing down vertically, I'm still doing the crosses the exact same way that I usually do. That's because I have found that way my crosses just looks much neater and much more even. And right now, I'm going to do something that people think is a little bit strange. I go up in the middle, bottom middle of that stitch, and then I go down the middle of the stitch, the center, because then my floss now is here in the back. So when I am jumping over here to do my next stitch, the floss will lay diagonally this way from the middle to here, and you can see it will then be hidden by these stitches. And I also do it that way because this leg right here would have been looking weird if it was being pulled this direction. So by doing this half stitch, I'm pulling that leg that direction instead of this direction. So it makes it look neater. And then what you most likely have seen if you have followed this series for a while, please feel free to go back to see the beginning of the series, because I stitch everything on while filming. Sometimes I'm out of frame, so it's not always on camera, but I try to always be on camera. So the pin stitch. When ending, I do the pin stitch under another stitch, unless if it were like here, that I had to end my floss here, I would do the pin stitch right here, because I know I would do another stitch in the same color or a lighter or a darker color than what I were stitching with further down here. But there isn't going to be any stitch under here, so I can't do the pin stitch here because then it will be visible. So what I do, I come up in the bottom middle. This I also do if it's on Aida. Like then I will pierce the fabric just between the bottom two holes of the stitch. And then I go down the center. Again, this is true also with Aida. You just have to pierce the fabric. Then I will go down, pull the floss with me. Then I will come to the top, middle, and then down the center again. And that way it's pinned down really nicely. You can also go from side to side. So you can come up the right or left side in the middle and go down the center and then do the opposite. And the reason I do it two opposite, like the opposite ways, like first from left and then from the right, or the top and then the bottom, is because the pin stitch is more even underneath, making it hide better. If I would have come up and done first the bottom down the center and then up the bottom again and down the center, you will get a little bit higher thickness right here with the pin stitch. And you would be able to see it if you don't have a really, really good coverage. So, plus it makes the stitch look more even, because the stitch would look a little bit wonky if it had a higher amount of floss just under the bottom half of the stitch instead of having an equal amount on the whole thing. And then I just come up in a hole close to where I did the pin stitch and I pull the floss pretty tight and cut closely. And with me pulling so tight, when coming up and snipping, it makes that little teeny tiny tail automatically go to the back of the fabric so it doesn't stick up in this hole. All right. So, a new way. No, I'm not going to take the new way because this is a perfect way to show my lasso method from the front. And what I will do with the lasso method from the front is I will go, this is the stitch I'm going to do. So I will go to the top part of the stitch and I will go over to the right side and go down a little bit further away. Then I will come up where my stitch is going. And then, so now the floss in the back is going like this. Okay? So you see, I don't pull it completely through. I leave a tiny bit of a tail. I can either make it long enough for me to be able to snip it off, or I can try and make it as short as possible so afterwards I can just use the needle to get that little tail going to the back. But I like to snip it off. So then I do the stitch as I normally would. I usually don't pull it. I don't do it totally as I would, because I just go down and come up like I would do the stitch, and then I pull. Because what happens now is then when I went from this, from the top right to the bottom right, there is now this floss now made a line this direction. And remember, there is a tail going this way, and now there is a floss. The floss is now going this way, then meaning it covers the tail and catches this on the back. So it now is catched on the back. And if you continue doing this, then you will continue catching it on the back. And you don't need to fiddle anything with it this way, because of that this tail went diagonally, you will always catch it when you do your stitches. So, and then I can go back. So now I can just pull this little tail and snip it off, and that floss is secured. It's secured on the back and it won't come out. Usually I try to be a little bit closer where I come up with the tail, like, so it's only like one stitch away, just so I don't have a really long tail on the back. But you don't need to do that. It's just a way of catching that tail on the back without having to turn over your fabric. And you can use like the same technique to end the floss. It's just a little bit more difficult because you need to know where your next stitches are going to be, and you can't always do it. So yeah, 7 ton with the last cone. So the two methods I have shown you now for starting floss is the main methods I'm using, and also the one I have showed for ending floss. It's the main method I have used. But there is a new method that has come up, and that's really nice because, like, with the loop method, you need to be stitching with 2 strands, and that's not always the case. And with the tail on the back, I'm not a fan, just because it leaves a tail on the back and sometimes you can see it a little bit through the fabric and stuff like that. Also, there is a third method I usually do, and that's the pin stitch method for starting the floss, that I will also show. So yeah, but there is a new method that has come out. A lot of people have seen it, and that's the one I'm really hoping to show you. So, but first, if I were to pretend that I was stitching this border down here, then I would be going down with my floss right here. Like if this was the white floss, did this stitch, I could jump down and go over to diagonally a tiny bit further down and leave the floss. And as I'm then stitching this row down, this floss on the back will be covered up and making it so it's secure. So that's the method with the tail on the back to end your floss. But that's a method I almost never use. I have sometimes used it if I stitch full coverage, but still, it's not one of my favorite ways because it tends to leave a lot of those small tails on the front of your fabric, and they will catch onto anything. So on your length of floss, going to do white because we have a lot of white stitches to do for the snow. So first off, when I have a full length, I usually always do the Duluth Method. And that's also what I'm going to do this time. Is it? I feel like the picture isn't as clean as it usually is. I don't know if it's the heat or... There, that looks better. All right. I think maybe I have accidentally put my finger over the camera lens on my phone, and since it's so hot, it makes it all smeary at once. If that's a word, I might just invented a word. Smeary. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first stitch is going to be right here, and that's a long lead stitch. So I'm gonna do the stitch, and then I'm gonna do the pin stitch underneath. So, and afterwards I have cut the floss, and then I usually like to start the floss with the pin stitch method. But that's hard if I need to do another one of these stitches that is single stitches, because it's hard to make a double pin stitch under the same stitch. Like, you can do it, but it will be a tiny bit bulky. So it's not my recommended way of doing it. So the method I'm going to show you now is loop method that you can also do with one strand. So normally I will go down the bottom left. We will call that the first part of the stitch. I will come up, actually, that's where I come up, and then I will go down the top right? That's the second part of the stitch. So call this hole bottom left 1, top right is 2, bottom right, will then be number 3, because that's the hole I will do my third part of the stitch. And then top left is 4. That's the fourth part of my stitch, because I go from here to there, from here to here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So with this method, I go down in 4 and I go up in 2. I pull it so there is just a tiny bit of a tail. Then I will go down in number 2 again, not pulling anything through, and come up in number 1. I go into the loop. I do that as one movement usually. And then I will pull the loop close to the fabric at number 2. And this time I'm going to go down number 2. You can go down number 1, but then you will get, like in this instance where I'm stitching with 2 strands, you will get 4 strands on your bottom leg. And if you have 1 strand, you will get 2 strands on the bottom leg. But if you go down into just right underneath the loop, it will magically pull the loop down. And as you can see, I'm pulling, and it's stuck. So now I can come up in number 3, put my needle on my needle minder, cut this little tail, and go down in number 4, and the stitch is completed. So that is the loop method you can do with 1 strand. This method is not defined by you having to have 2 strands, because in a way you're making your own loop with the floss. And it works. And that means if I needed to, I could also do a pin stitch under here, because there isn't a pinch stitch under there already. So it wouldn't be too bulky. This method, I do love it. It's just I'm so used to doing the pin stitch. So when I'm stitching over 2 or an Ada, I will do the pin stitch. But if I'm stitching over 1, like I do with a lot of my full coverage, stitching 1 over 1, I will use this method now to start my floss. And it's so much better than what I originally was doing. And you can also end your floss with this method, but that's not a thing I have gotten the hang of, so I'm not going to show you that. But Nitty Nat Stitcher on FlossTube, she has started to do FlossTube. Her name is Natalie. She's a good friend. So Nitty Nat Stitches. So yes, I used block letters here and not for the eye, so you could easily see the eye. So Nitty Nat Stitches. If you want to see, she is doing this method both to start and end the floss. So if you want to see how she ends the floss with the same method, go and watch her video, because that's not something I have gotten the hang of. Like, I can start it, but I don't end it. Because the thing is, like, if I can end with the pin stitch, I will. And on 1 over 1, I can't start with the pin stitch, but I am able to end it with a pin stitch. So yeah. And I think the last one we have to show is starting with a pin stitch. The one I'm usually always doing, I feel. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, I go down between 1 and 2. No, I don't. I totally forgot how to do this now. I go down in the center of where my stitch will be. And the way I usually count that is 1 to the right and 1 up. So I go down, I don't pull it fully through. And then I come up in the top between 3 and 4. And I pull it so there's a tiny tail hanging, enough for me to be able to hold with my finger. And I go down, straight down on the floss itself, like piercing the floss going down, because that's the main thing you have to do when doing a pin stitch. Is you're supposed to pierce the floss. That is how you're pinning it in place. And then I go to the bottom middle between 1 and 2, and then down in the center. And now that's secure. I know some people only do the first leg of the pin stitch for securing. I always do 2. And 1, I feel it's more secure. Sometimes only doing 1 isn't making it secure enough. And 2, having both of those legs, from one from the top to the middle and one from the bottom to the middle, makes the stitch more even that I'm doing on top. The stitch that will be over the pin stitch looks neater when I'm doing 2 legs. So that's why I'm doing 2 legs. And when I'm stitching with silks, I actually sometimes will do 3 or 4 legs because silk can be really slippery. So it's kind of hard to pin down. But just making an extra leg helps it sit in place. And usually, for some reason, like just having 2 going from the bottom to the center and 1 from the top to the center, it doesn't make a huge difference in how it looks, surprisingly. I think maybe it's because it pulled so tight with how it's done, that it just looks okay. I'm not sure. So maybe I'm just imagining the whole, I think the stitch doesn't look correct in my mind, just because I know that it's not symmetrical. All right, so from here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I do when I count, I have often had issues with counting wrong sometimes. Oops. That's not what I was going to do. So I'm showing you a tiny bit of the pattern. And what I will do, and instead of thinking 1, 2, 3 squares, I count always from where the bottom left part of my stitches. So 1, 2, 3. And if I'm counting this way and then down, say I'm supposed to get to this stitch, I will count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I will count 1, 2. And I'm also doing that when I'm stitching. And that way I have found myself to become more correct when counting stitches. You might have noticed a slight difference in the video. It's because it's really hot, as I have said. And I got a warning from my phone that it was starting to get too hot. And some functionalities would be turned off. So I had to, the light from my phone turned itself off. Because I have the light on my phone on when stitching on camera. So that means I need to take a break. I can't film much longer. But I will do at least this stitch. So down for 1, 2, 3, 4. And then nope, not finding the center. Because this is a single stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I will always count down to this bottom left, even though like now I'm gonna do the loop method with one strand, or you can do it with several strands. I'm going down in what will be in hole 4, like we discussed when we did this method. So and if you find the loop, like right now, I find the loop to be a little bit sticking up, just pull that tiny part right here and it will lay down nice and even. Then doing ending with a pin stitch. So as you can see, usually I always end with a pin stitch from the front. Like, I don't have many good ways to end from the front. I just have the one that I love. But I have several ways of starting the floss. So, this is where we are right now. So we got a few single snowflakes and these snowflakes, 2 cones done. So I am going to take a break from filming because my phone needs to cool down, and then hopefully I will be back filming later today, because today my husband and son is away, so I have the time to film, and I'm trying to film as much as I can before they come home, because that means I can get ahead of filming again and hopefully keep doing them regularly. So that, have a lovely rest of your Friday or Saturday or whatever day you're watching this. And I will see you next week. Goodbye.